Supporting the African American Learner is a document designed to address policies and practices that have negatively impacted educational outcomes for African American students. It's important that we understand the role that history has played in the schooling of African American students today. In the beginning, when the first ship containing enslaved Africans arrived in America in the 1600s, it was against the law to educate the enslaved. When the Civil War ended in 1865, efforts were made in African American communities to establish schools, but few students actually received a quality education. For almost 100 years after the Civil War, the Jim Crow laws legalized racial segregation and denied African Americans the right to vote, hold jobs, get an education, and to take advantage of other important opportunities. The landmark decision of the U.S. Supreme Court in Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896 upheld the constitutionality of racial segregation in public facilities. This court decision established separate public schools for Black and white students, and therefore put in place long-standing educational disadvantages. The U.S. Supreme Court decision of Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954 overturned Plessy versus Ferguson and specifically called out separate facilities as being inherently unequal. At that time, groups such as the Little Rock Nine entered all-white schools and desegregation efforts began. Though these efforts started, little to no effort was placed on enacting policies or practices that would address the inequities set forth in the beginning. As time has evolved, these inequities have resulted in continuously widening opportunity gaps for African American students. The inescapable reality of the devastating impact of injustices on African American communities is clear and present in our communities and in our schools today. The Los Angeles County Office of Education and the county's 80 school districts serve 1/3 of California's more than 324,000 African American students. This document, Supporting the African American Learner, identifies and addresses factors contributing to systemic racism in education and recommends a pathway to creating a more equitable and socially just system. There are 4 grounding principles that serve as the foundation for this document. Principle 1 explores ways in which belief systems and the dynamics of power and privilege play out in the school setting. The second principle, Systems Change, gives consideration to conditions including resources, policies, and practices that are necessary to create educational systems that facilitate and support learning. Principle 3 focuses on practices that create engaging and supporting learning environments through culturally relevant, sustaining, and revitalizing high-quality instruction for Black students. And finally, Principle 4, Mitigating the Accumulation of Disadvantages, focuses on ways that schools and communities can partner to address the diverse and complex needs of Black students. So, how do we bring this all together to create change in our schools? The exploration of each principle in the document is followed by practical recommendations and strategies for implementation, along with tools for self-reflection that can be used by teachers and administrators. Sustainable change must be addressed at the systems level by bold school and district leaders who are willing to examine policies and practices through an equity lens. For more than 150 years, our educational system has produced exactly what it was designed to produce: inequitable, inadequate, and unacceptable conditions for Black students. It's time for change.